这种获胜的潜力和能力。所以今天这个 seminar 这个讲座呢，最主要的还是针对大家的一些比较基本的问题，就是说什么是 MUN MUN 的比赛是怎样进行的，然后我们的学生应该怎么样去学习，才能让自己变得更加的有竞争力。那 Nearpan 呢是我们的head coach，就是我们的 MUN program 的主教练。我们也是很多很多，基本上所有的比赛都是以他带队参赛为主，所以他对带领队伍来获奖获胜，是非常非常有经验。那我们现在就我转换成英语啊，So Nearpan, I just give a real quick introduction about the MUN program, about the winning strategy and your experience. And let me hand it back over to you, and you can give people more details in terms of the MUN program, uh, the winning strategy, practice plan, and so on and so forth. Okay, back to you.
All right, thank you, Henry. Hi, everyone. So for this meeting, I'd like to get a sense of exactly who is here. So a couple of things. One, if everyone could turn on their camera, that would be great. Personally, whenever I like to do presentations or meeting, I just want to get a sense of exactly who's in the meeting. I also want to get a sense of who here is currently in our Model UN program, because this meeting and presentation is very much intended for people not in the Linky Model UN program. We will be doing a separate seminar for you guys fairly soon where we talk more about, upcoming events for the summer, our game plan for the next couple of weeks and months. So this meeting is really explicitly intended for people that are outside of Linky Model UN and are new to Model UN. So just want to get some quick context, and parents are also welcome to turn on your cameras. I think this presentation will be particularly helpful for you. Just want to get a little bit of information. Can I get a raise of hands? Who here is new to Model UN? Like you've never attended, you're not sure what it is exactly. You can just raise your hands up high. It'll help me a lot just to understand. All right, so we have Rusi and Melvin and Angela, Emma, and maybe Leon. So for the other people who didn't raise their hand, maybe Eric, Nadia, Samuel, would I be correct in saying that you guys already do Model UN, just not necessarily with Linky? Okay, all right, sounds good. All right, guys, if everyone could do me a little bit of a favor, because this will help me greatly in being able to assist you. If you guys could take a minute and go into the chat and just write down any experience you have with Model UN and maybe just your grade. That's all the information I need to know because that will change a lot about how I do presentation. If you're a parent, please put that in the chat as well, just so that I can note down, okay, who here is just trying to understand MUN versus who themselves are going to be competing in Model UN. That would be great. So just take a minute. You can put in the all chat. It's not a problem at all. And then for everyone else in the room, if you guys can get your cameras on, that would be very helpful. Okay, and if you guys can also, just to clarify a little bit, when you guys, for anybody who'd like to, you're more than welcome to send me a more elaborate description. For example, like, which school, which committee, things like that. And again, for anybody who is in the Linky Model UN program, this is really not necessarily intended for you. And we'll have like we call it internal all hands meeting fairly soon, but you're more than welcome to listen along. Because there are some people here are completely brand new versus people who actually understand how Model UN works. Two very different things there. Yeah, generally speaking, so just to because I got a couple questions in the chat. All it really is that if you are someone who is either an external non-Linky student or if you are new to modeling altogether, that's what this presentation is intended for, right? So those two groups. So if you're currently a Linky modeling student, not sure if this is going to be the best time for you, but again, welcome to be here. So having said that, I think I've been able to answer most of the questions in the chat, and we'll get started. So really quickly, guys, there's going to be a couple different things we're going to cover in this presentation today. These are broadly understanding the characteristics of our Model UN program. So generally what happens is we're going to talk a little bit about an introduction to competition. And we're going to just try to understand how Model UN competition works, what makes somebody successful in Model UN. The students in our program understand this innately, right? Because of the way that we train and the way that we teach builds into a very particular philosophy and a very particular goal. So what I'm going to try to do is try to help understand what makes Linky as a Model UN team distinct from other teams. But before I do that, I am going to be spending a little bit of time explaining Model UN, just so for everybody who is completely new, so you don't feel like you're completely out of the loop. Okay. So having said that, guys, there's
I saw
quite a
your
few.
ball roll back.
Oh, sorry. Did you have a question?
Yeah. Oh,
Oh, I think that might have been an accident. So right now for the agenda, you'll see here, we're going to be covering a couple different things. We'll be talking a little bit about Model UN or program. Then we're going to try to understand the circuit. And I'm going to actually show you on when we search through websites a little bit what that looks like. Then we're going to be talking a little about growth and improvement, a little bit about Harvard MUN Canada, and then we'll do a quick question and answer. I'm going to actually lean towards a little bit more question and answer because if there are quite a few people that have never done MUN before, I think it'd be better for me to give you a little one-on-one help and just give you a little bit of guidance on what you should be doing next. So let's try to understand what Model UN is and what makes it so exciting, right? What makes it so different. So Model United Nations is at the moment the most popular public speaking activity done by students around the world. So no matter which country you're in fact, which continent you're in, what you'll see here is that Model UN is something that kids love to participate in, and it is an incredibly exciting activity. So to make it really simple, Model United Nations is a simulation of the United Nations. If you're unfamiliar with the United Nations, we also call it UN. The UN is a famous international institution, which is the cornerstone of global IR relations. Their entire job is to help build systems where countries can come together to resolve issues, to negotiate, to try to help find solutions to some of the world's most difficult problems. So what we do in Model UN is we try to take on the role of that diplomat, where you yourself are representing a country, you're given a challenging issue, and you're trying to find a creative and innovative solution to solve that problem. That's what we do in Model UN. So in Model United Nations, unlike other speaking activities, it isn't purely a speaking activity. What you will see are a combination of a variety of skills. It requires your ability to know how to speak at a high level, to be able to research at a high level. You need to be able to negotiate, and you also need to be able to write at a high level. So in Model UN, you will be challenged in many different ways in the process of both developing, creating, then advocating for a solution. And we'll talk about that. So what happens in the beginning of a Model UN conference is that you're typically focused on trying to figure out which topic is more urgent. So if right now there is the conflict going on in the Middle East, and there's also a conflict going on in Ukraine, the committee's first job is to try to figure out, well, what is going to be a greater priority? What should we focus on first? Once they've had the chance to do that, students will make some small, short speeches in trying to convince the committee the best course of action forward. And in these debates, they will have very, very passionate conversations about, is our strategy the right strategy? And how should the perspectives and views of different countries be taken into consideration? After that initial period of people proposing ideas, they'll get into what we call these unmods or unmoderated caucuses. This is where people will spend time negotiating and coming up with compromises that they think everybody can agree with, that everybody can support. After they've had the time of coming together and figuring out some sort of interesting compromise, they present their ideas in front of the rest of the committee and try to defend them against critique and defend them against some very difficult questioning. If your paper or the ideas that you write down are able to be passed, then you are able to win a first place prize in Model UN. And that's what we call a gavel. So, what students in the Model UN world chase after are gavels. That is generally the goal. So, having said that, there is a version of Model UN that's very interesting. It's called Crisis. Crisis is a specialty version of Model UN, where instead of having two static topics, what ends up happening is you get this very interesting real-time scenario where somebody will run into the room saying, delegates, there is something terrible that has happened. There's been an attack on the Capitol and the prime minister is missing. What should we do? In a committee like this, you're really taking on the role of a character, not a country. And your job is to respond to emergencies the ways that governments would. And the emergencies can range from everything from governance to politics to healthcare to a variety of different scenarios. And generally, what you end up seeing is that you're forced to think on your feet. They'll put you in difficult situations that even adults, right, with all the time and energy in the world, would not be able to give you a convincing or clear answer. And students are forced to make some very difficult choices. That is the goal of the crisis committee. It's considered by some to be fairly advanced. I personally consider it its own distinct category. So whenever you're at a conference and you see crisis, really at a high level of Model UN, we just call it a specialty. And that's something I can talk about a little bit later. Okay, so because a few additional people joined the call, I just wanted to send a quick reminder. Would love to have you guys keep your cameras on. I just wanted to get a quick question for anybody who recently joined. It'll give me a little bit of assistance. If you have previous experience in Model UN, please put it in the chat because I have allocated a significant portion of the presentation to explaining Model UN. However, if you are familiar with MUN, then I won't need to cover this content. Thank you. And again, just the details would be great. Thank you so much. I'll just give everyone a moment to do that. Okay, so while I'm seeing that, and I can see here, there are quite a few people here with experience. So let's get into a little bit more of the details of our Model UN program. So, in understanding our Model UN program, I want to first introduce you to the team. So, right now, the Linky Model UN program is the largest MUN program in Canada by the number of active members, by the from the competitions we attend to the number of coaches. We got an all-star roster here. Very briefly, I myself, you see me right in the middle. That is me. I'm Mr. Nirpan Sivakumar. I'm the head coach of the Linky Model UN program, and I generally serve to oversee the academic development and help lead students in competitions. But I will mention that we have an excellent team that's with us from honestly from all parts of Ontario and now expanding to the rest of Canada as well. So you'll see Miss Nicole Patterson. She is the department head of languages at the Bishop Strawn School. You'll see Mr. Peter Osorin, who is the head of, or who is one of the lead geography teachers at King's Christian Collegiate. You will see Mr. William Wang, who is currently a fourth-year university student at the University of Toronto, serving as the lead coordinator for Harvard MUN Canada, and formerly from the West Coast Circuit, very experienced with conferences like CASMUN and VMUN. You have Mr. Mark Wu. He's been around for a very long time, has led one of the largest conferences in Ontario, which is CCI MUN, and he teaches a variety of levels. We have Mr. Charez, who helps teach a bit of a bridge course for those that have done debate before and are trying to understand the basics of Model UN. You have Mr. Adam Wu, Mr. Jake Gunn. They are former students of mine who are both in university, both Ivy League champions themselves, and are excited to get into the world of teaching. We have Miss Yvonne Reitmer. She's more of a health science topic specialist, and she's a teacher at Hillfield Strathallan College. We have Mr. David Miller, or Mr. Dave Miller, who is a teacher at Fernhill Secondary School, excellent expertise with younger students. And then we have our head teaching assistant, Miss Yuki Wen, who is a student at BSS herself. So generally speaking, you'll see that our roster actually varies a lot in terms of skill set, languages, capabilities, and what they do. And that's intentional. Our goal is not to necessarily make every class cookie cutter, nor is our goal or intention to make every class feel exactly the same. The goal here is to make sure that at every stage of your development, no matter who you are, we can tailor what you need and find you the right instructor to help you. And that goes a lot into our philosophy. So I want to quickly explain our MUN program because that will give you a little context. In our Model UN program, how it generally works is we have two distinct tracks. We have the club track and competitive track. The club track is intended for people who are just completely new to MUN. They're just trying to understand the basics of Model UN. They're trying to understand, how Model UN works and the fundamentals. But the competitive track is different. The competitive track is intended for people immediately competing at Ivy League conferences or competing at the national level. The competitive track are for those that see Model UN really as a global, highly respected, prestigious activity. And the competitive track is no joke. It has very strict requirements, and I'll show you that in a minute about what you need to do just to maintain your status in it. It's not intended as a starting point for anyone except for potentially high level debate students. But what you will see, and I'd like everyone to take a look, is the level 7 class. Our Model UN program is different than almost anything else in a simple way. The goal is not just to win as many awards as possible. In fact, objectively speaking, once you have won at a high level, I actually ask you to stop, right? Because the way that we look at Model UN awards is for university admission, but also for your own personal growth. We want to make sure at some point we can try to help you win at the most prestigious conferences that exist in the circuit. But once you do, I don't want you to keep winning because the awards at some point on university applications become redundant. That's the reason. There are exceptions to this. If you win younger than grade 11 at a young age, and you win at a conference that isn't necessarily Harvard Boston, or you don't gavel at Harvard Boston, we generally will allow you to continue to maybe compete once a year in almost upgrading your award, right? So if you had an award at Cornell, you aim for Princeton. You won at Princeton, you aim for Harvard USA. But generally speaking, by the time you've won at any major Ivy League conference, we pivot you into our level 7 class. Our level 7 class has a fundamentally different goal and objective. It's about taking the ideas that you find and you create in Model UN and applying them to the real world. It's about how can we learn from the things that we have seen in Model UN and make real change. This isn't just for university admissions purposes or things like that, although it does help. It's because the goal of Model UN fundamentally is to make capable leaders. And the hardest tests that you will ever face are not in a Model UN class or competition, they're in the real world. And that's something you have to keep in mind. I'll talk more about that and the very cool projects that we've been able to do. So generally speaking, our program works like this. We have regular promotion-based level advancement, which is just you complete your level, usually 2 semesters per level, and you slowly move up through the levels. If you're an older student, we accelerate you very quickly so that you can catch up with your peers. And then if you're younger, those that are able to show and demonstrate that they have done well at competition, we will also advance their level placement, their performance, things like that. So it really is depending on your age and where you're at. Having said that, just keep in mind, because I'm about to go into really the competitive circuit, keep in mind that for level 4, 5, 6, which a lot of people get very eager about, there's a requirement to travel every school year, right? It's not optional, it's a requirement. And generally speaking, for those that are very young, they should not be in level 4, 5, 6, because these travel requirements exist. Because if you feel like you have to go out of your way to compete, then it's not the kind of class that you should be in. I just want to say that early. Okay, so before I get into how the Model UN circuit works, actually, you know what? Let me talk a little about the Model UN circuit first, and then I'll talk about how Linky has done. Maybe if that gives you a little confidence. So having said that, can anyone put into the chat if they have traveled to any major competition? Could everyone just throw that into the chat? Have you ever gone to any major competition, and not just in Model UN, but even outside of Model UN? Have you traveled to any major event? Okay, so it seems like most people have not necessarily gone there. Happy to see some people who've gone to MUN because MUN's a pretty major competition, but that's what we would call regional. Regional is something that would be larger than a local conference because a local conference is something you see at a high school level. Conferences like MUN, if I'm correct, that's Marianopolis, it's in Quebec. Conferences like that would reach regional status. So let me talk about the world of large scale competition. So to start, you can take a look here. In the world of Model UN, there are a variety of conferences, but I'm going to explain the very top first. So what you see in Model UN is that you can go to almost any kind of local school and you'll have a chance to learn about MUN, right? So you can go to a local high school and they'll have like small committees and classrooms. They'll have high school students as judges, and they'll also give out prizes and awards. And that's what we call a local competition. But let's talk about what people are fighting for. So in the world of Model UN, the most famous conferences that exist are the ones that take place or are run by the university students at Ivy League schools. Yale, Harvard, Princeton, all of these institutions, the largest club that exists at their schools are the Model UN clubs. You can Google it. For example, for Harvard, they have been running their Model UN conference for 73 years. The largest student club at Harvard University, what actual Harvard students do, is Model UN. Because Model UN has always, and I say this really nicely, it's always been the domain of the geekiest and the smartest kids because it's just a battle over politics and diplomacy, right? These are people who like to spend their free weekend talking about politics. It's what gets people excited, especially in academia. So when we talk about Model UN, I want to try to explain what you see in front of you. I'm going to start with Yale because they're actually a little bit more friendly in some ways in the way that they design their things. So let's try to understand what's in front of us. Let's look at this. Yale Model UN, say it's the 53rd year. That means they've been running it for 53 years. When we say Yale Model UN, what we mean here is a conference run by Yale University students, and you'll see more of their website as they're updating it for 2027. These organizations have existed for a long time, and they have these websites are even out of date. They are now in the thousands of students from across the world, right? So what happens here, and let's take a look at committees, is when you go to Yale MUN, and let's say there were 2,000 students, for example, right? I believe the number is actually off. I think they're at 3,000 now, but they're at capacity. I'll double check. So having said that, when we look at the committees, let's take a look. When we see a committee like this, where let's say we go, for example, UNESCO, right? And the topic is the committee is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. Topic one is ensuring equal access to education in conflict zones. So in this committee, you'll see chairs. If you don't know what a chair is, you can write it down. A chair is a judge in Model UN. Their job is to both select students for awards, but also moderate the debate. The chairs that you see at a Yale conference are Yale University students, right? So they'll usually have two topics. So in this case, they have ensuring equal access to education, and the other one has to do with balancing technological innovation with AI standards. So when we take a look here, what's going to happen in this committee is out of the 2,000 to 3,000 students at Yale's conference, let's say maybe 200 people are allocated towards this debate. So those 200 people will receive a document in advance where they can read about the topic, understand the problem, and then they can debate it over the course of 4 days. But there will be other committees. There will be committees like UNICEF, DISEC, SPECPOL. So when we go to a Model UN conference, one thing that people make a mistake about is they treat it like, let's say, maybe a debate tournament. A debate tournament is different. A debate tournament is like a pyramid. You are fighting for the very top within the conference, and there's only one or two people that can win that conference. Model UN is more like a team sport, but it's also not soccer. It's not like you win together and lose together only. The best analogy for Model UN is the Olympics. You have an Olympic team, but you're each competing in your own sport. So at a Model UN conference, if we all were a team, let's say, for example, I'm going to call random people in the chat, Emma might be in the Socham committee. Rushi might be in the UNESCO committee. Samuel might be in the UNICEF committee. Ace might be in the SPECPOL committee. So they're all competing against different students in these multi-thousand person conference, meaning each of these students can win first place. So at a conference like Yale, they will have dozens of committees and they rotate between both the university and a hotel so people have a chance to see the university and go to a hotel. So what you'll see here is they'll run all kinds of interesting topics from the World Bank to Office for Disaster Risk Reduction to the United Nations Environment Program to Committee of Experts in Public Administration. They also have regional bodies like African Union, Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Arctic Council. But then they have some fun committees, and the fun committees are worth thinking about. So what you'll see here is they'll have committees like Hunger Games, Lego Movie, Money Heist, Council of Olympians, Qing Imperial Court. These committees are real committees at Yale University's MUN. Even Crisis in Bikini Bottom is a real committee at Yale University's Model UN Conference. And when you go to something like this, you'll see here that you're not representing a country, you're representing characters in SpongeBob. And your chairs are still Yale University students. They have real topics like the Krabby Patty patent plight, Plankton's last attempt, and you will seriously debate this for 4 days. And what is interesting about this is that the awards that you could win at a conference like this or at a committee like this are the exact same awards that you will win in a hardcore academic committee like the World Bank. And university admissions officers don't really differentiate. A gavel is a gavel. And that matters because of the fact that when you're applying for university admission, you want to be strategic in the kinds of committees you think that you could excel in. But to be crystal clear, it does not really matter, at least directly for university admission, whether you win in SpongeBob or some economics committee. It really matters the most where you win. There is a huge difference between winning at Yale or Harvard and winning at a local conference. But just so you can see the rest of the committees that they're offering, you'll see that they have a section for crisis committees at Yale. They're running like a Star Wars committee, Fall of the Roman Republic, Death Note, selecting the next pope, building the first nuclear weapon, Yellowstone explosion, all kinds of stuff like that. So that's generally what the world of a large Model UN conference looks like. But there's more. What you may not know is that in conferences like the United States, they exceeded their capacity many, many years ago, decades ago, to the point where it's not just that they're popular, it's that they are being crushed under capacity and attendance. So the most competitive Model UN conference in the world in terms of prestige is Harvard Model UN USA. This event in Boston has, including students, staff, teachers, and everyone else, almost 4,500 people. They sell 2 entire hotels, and they have a convention center in the middle. This conference had something like 3,500 competitors, 500 teachers, and then hundreds of Harvard staff. And the number of applications exceeded almost 8,000. And every team that applied was capped at 20. So a conference like this is different than any other. You don't apply for a conference like this on your own, or typically you don't because you're unlikely to be successful to get spots. You usually apply as a team. And the team applies around April, and the results get released in August. And whoever gets a spot then has, a few weeks to register. And you can get up to 4 months of preparation time, depending on the year. Because Harvard Model UN built a reputation of being so prestigious and such at capacity, what ended up happening is that they ended up expanding abroad. If you take a look here, you'll see they have this international tab. The international tab is what we call the periphery circuit. Conferences like Harvard MUN Australia, Harvard MUN Canada, China, Dubai, India, Latin America, these conferences are run by Harvard University students, but take place abroad. One, because they're at maximum capacity for any venue that exists in Boston. And number two, because they want to help build and demonstrate their values and their version of Model UN across the world. But what's happened is all these conferences have now become, I would argue, the second most prestigious conferences that exist in the Model UN circuit. So if the number one tier is winning at a US conference, plus let's say maybe Oxford and maybe MUN in Europe, the second most prestigious conferences in the world that you can win at are the ones in the periphery circuit or the satellite circuit, right? So those are the competitions that you're going to want to compete in at some point if the timing is right. So having said that, I will mention that when we talk about competitions, we usually try to talk about what is a good use of your time and your energy. But sometimes there are some trips that we do, that we go to, that aren't purely because they're the best use of our time and energy. One of those trips, which I can show you really quickly, is Yale Model UN Korea. So we went to this competition in November, and there are some places that these Ivy League conferences run that I will argue are the most popular trips that Linky actually has ever run. This trip is the one that even more than Harvard USA had the highest number of applicants. And I'll be really honest, it's just because we wanted to go to Korea. There were so many students who wanted to go to Korea that the longest wait list we had for a competition was Yale MUN Korea. And it's because when we do a trip like South Korea, we will definitely take a few days, probably like 4 days for the competition itself, but we'll probably add on 2 or 3 days vacation. So I'm not going to lie, guys, when we were in South Korea in November, our students, we did well, but also we had a chance to go visit Gyeongbokgung Palace and dress in traditional clothing. We had a chance to go do a K-pop dance class, and we're at like 1 Million Dance Studio. We had a chance to go visit like the League of Legends headquarters in South Korea and got to see Valorant and some games and stuff like that, some kind of studio. We end up doing a lot of shopping, seeing the giant Gangnam style hands. So I will mention that although we are a very serious program and we are very focused on performance, once in a while I will break my rule because I understand a trip like Korea is a once in a lifetime. So if I think that the timing is right and it would not burden you, it's something we can talk about, but just want to let you know. Now, let's talk a little bit more about understanding a bit about our track record and then why Linky is different. Why exactly we've seen so much success in the circuit. Also, Arian, I mentioned this earlier. Arian, are you in the meeting right now by any chance? Okay, he may not be here, but one of our strongest students just
I'm
happens to
here
be in the.
actually.
Oh, hey, Arian. Do you mind if a little bit later I get you just to talk about your experiences? We went to Harvard Model Congress Europe. This presentation is meant to be for those that are like really completely new to MUN. But since you're here, it'd be great if you could talk for a few minutes and maybe get your camera on as well a little bit later.
Yeah, of course.
Perfect. Thank you, Arian. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Okay, so having said that, let's take a look about just the last couple of months. So within the last year, how has our program been doing? So in the last year, starting from the summer and fall of 2025, I will say that we had an amazing start with winning back-to-back delegation awards, both at the WeMUN Asia Pacific Expo in Beijing and winning at Harvard Model UN China. So these are very challenging achievements because we actually had mostly two different groups of students compete in Beijing and compete in Guangzhou. So we had a lot of our teams training under many different formats and systems. So for anyone here who sometimes travels to China during the summer, let me explain what's kind of cool about the WeMUN conference. The WeMUN Expo is not a normal Model UN conference. Normally, when I've been talking about Model UN, I say, okay, we're going to go to Harvard or Yale or something like that, right? This is not that. When we go to WeMUN, they have literally like 7 different university partners. So they will have, for example, Boston University's Model UN, they'll have Berkeley, Oxford, Yale, U Chicago, McGill, and then they have other universities from like China as well. So they have students from Tsinghua University, students from Peking University, and other places. And they will all run their own styles of Model UNs with their own awards. So effectively, you have multiple simultaneous competitions using not even the same Model UN style. For example, what Berkeley will do is they'll have a very academic approach in some cases to their awards and to how they judge students. And then some conferences like Yale very much emphasize the collaboration, the cooperation more so than other conferences. So you have to adapt to each of the university team's Model UN approach or strategy when you're trying to prepare for something like WEMA. And then so at the same time, you have what is a smaller conference, but I would argue maybe more competitive conference, which is Harvard MUN China. Harvard MUN China has been running for almost 20 years now. It's one of the oldest Harvard conferences abroad. And that competition had teams from 20 plus countries. You saw teams from Brazil, Russia, all over Asia, even from Africa that came in, and we were all meeting in Guangzhou. We were very fortunate to say that on our team, we had 16 out of the 17 students win an award, which is an incredible result. So generally what we learn from the Chinese circuit is a chance for us to get exposure to the broader circuit abroad, for us to see emerging strategies at the beginning of the school year. And I can talk a little bit about what we learned there as well. So generally speaking, from August to December, we won over 125 Model UN awards. So that's around like 4 months. A third of those awards are from the Ivy League plus Oxford. So think Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Oxford, Berkeley, U Chicago, McGill, and more. We were able to win fourth place in the world at Harvard Boston, which is the ultimate championship conference in the United States. And we were able to also win best delegation at Harvard MUN China, best delegation at WEMUN, the top international team at Princeton. We were also the top international team at Yale Korea, and we had one of the youngest students to gavel at SUNS this year. For university admissions for the previous year, because this year we're still collecting information, we had the majority of our students who were able to continue with us until the end of university applications. The majority of our students who were in our program at the time went to the Ivy League, with Sarah Lee, Thivy, and Jackson all going to UPenn, one going to Huntsman, one going to, well, Wharton and Huntsman, one going to Wharton and being a Rise Scholar, getting their tuition fully covered for, one going to engineering. We had William He, who is the lead of Oxford MUN Canada, ends up going to the Cornell Nolan School of Hospitality. It's really famous, and a bunch of other incredible university acceptances. The reason why the Linky students, more so than anyone else, have seen this level of success, like it's a bit unprecedented, I'll be really honest. The reason that it exists is because what we value is fundamentally different. We're not really here for the optics of things. I personally don't do things just because I think they look good, because I don't think that's a good use of time. For example, if somebody has won in Model UN, it's very easy to push them into another competition if it doesn't necessarily benefit them. But I personally don't see value in that. All of our students compete and aim for awards that they think will legitimately enhance their applications and enhance their own learning and development. But not every conference does that. And I can talk more about what's suitable for each and every one of you. In fact, I don't even mind talking to some of you guys one-on-one to try to figure out what that might look like. So I will get into that as well. But long story short, the reason why our students were able to produce such absolutely mind-blowing university results last year is because of the fact that they are very, very disciplined in the way that they think about their growth, the way that they think about their time. And that is a message I really want to get across today. So we also have some other stuff that I thought was really cool. Lots of people getting internships for consulting, for medicine, for research papers, and then new conferences and grants, and a lot more. I will mention there is something I want to add to this slide. Although we did compete a little bit earlier this year, I haven't updated our awards results. I do want to talk about a trip we went to very recently. Our Linky Model UN team, just a few weeks ago, for the first time, as one of the first Canadian teams, we competed in something called Harvard Model Congress. So we were at Harvard Model Congress Europe. This isn't Model UN. It's actually a spin-off of Model UN. Model Congress has existed for decades. We're talking like it split off from Model UN almost 50 years ago, but it follows Model UN tradition. It's a focus on US politics. So politicians like Bill Clinton have spoken highly of Model Congress. They're featured on the website talking about how important they think it is. And we have had many students in our program that have won Model UN at such a young age. We were trying to figure out, is there another distinct opportunity where we could still leverage similar skills? So we decided to go to this conference. With Model Congress, a lot of our students here have won nationally or internationally already, but I'm very proud to say that for the first time that we have ever competed in a conference like this, being one of the first ever Canadians to compete at a conference like this, we had every single student win an award with 5 out of 6 gavels. And in fact, one of the students won 2 different awards, which is incredible. Honestly, I feel like that deserves a round of applause. Please join me in just giving them a brief round of applause for incredible performance. And what I will mention here, just before I give it off to one of our students, is when we were in Madrid, because we were in Spain during March break for this trip. When we were in Spain, we actually, in a long story, ran into the Secretary General of the real United Nations Tourism Agency. She is an actual public figure. You can Google her. So, Her Excellency, the leader of the UN Tourism Agency, had a chance to actually meet with us. So, we had a private, personal meeting with her where we had a chance to go to her boardroom, ask her some questions. And we are currently just I can't release too many details about this, and unfortunately, Arian can't either. But we are currently exploring a potential project together that we hope to have more information about maybe later this year. But these are the kinds of things that some of our most elite competitive students are doing, and I thought it was just an incredible and like to share. Arian, since you're in this call and you've had a chance to see competition, you gavelled at Suns, you've competed at Harvard, USA, and Boston, and on top of that, you've had the chance to gavel at Harvard Model Congress Europe. Do you want to just talk for a few minutes about what you've seen in the world of MUN, maybe any general tips, tricks, advice, anything like that?
Okay, thank you so much, Neuropan. So I like to say that especially this trip to Harvard Model Congress Europe, it was pretty different because Harvard, like Model Congress, is essentially like old school Model UN, and actually, like our entire team that went to compete there really liked Model Congress, and we were thinking of doing like more Model Congress in the future because Model Congress is basically Model UN with even more debate, and it's also like fully like how do I say, like no technology. So even the unmods is like on paper, and we all really like that because then like you can't use AI, and it was just like a lot better. There was more debates, there was pros and cons speeches, and it was really similar, but we'd like to say it was even more fun because you got to debate more, you got a lot more chances to speak, and the environment was also a lot better. It's a lot like less toxic, I would say. And yeah, and the other bigger tournament competitions I've been to is Harvard USA, Harvard HMUN USA. And I was in a GA. It was really fun. And it was like one of like the best conferences I've been to. It is really competitive, but you get to learn a lot. And I like to say that I just started Model UN in September, and with like Neuropan's guidance, I've actually like progressed like really fast. So since like starting in September, I like to say like that's not even like 1 year ago, and I already have 5 Model UN awards. So I like to say like learning at Link Key really like helped my confidence. It helped my public speaking. And Model UN is not just like I know a lot of students do debate, and debate is just purely like speaking and like the things you're saying. However, Model UN consists of like your speeches and also something called Unmod, which is like you collaborating with other delegates, like other students. And I like to say this helps like your social skills a lot. It helps teamwork, and it helps you like build yourself as a leader because you have to be like the leader of your group to stand out and to win awards. So I like to say Model UN is like it helps you in a lot of different aspects, not just like your speaking skills and your confidence, but also like teamwork and like leadership and a lot of that too. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Arian. I appreciate it. And thank you for giving a little insight as well. Okay, so having said that, I'd like to talk a little bit about the world of Model UN in Canada, because I know there's some people here never been to a conference before, just trying to understand what they can expect in the country. So we definitely have the higher echelons and tiers of Model UN that sometime or at some point we're hoping to get you guys into. But I want to start with something a little bit more simple. So in Canada, we have what I would say is the best of the best grassroots Model UN circuits. Grassroots meaning that instead of just a few famous institutions running Model UN, you really have the average person organizing a conference, getting things together, and creating an experience that they want other people to learn from, to enjoy, to benefit from. So we have some of the largest high school student run events in the world. If you look in Vancouver, we call them the big three: Tasman, Kaiman, and VMUN. The big three Vancouver conferences all exceed 1,000 people in attendance, with including students and staff, and they are literally run by high school students. It's incredibly impressive. And this is not something you see in other countries in the world. In fact, one of the reasons why Harvard Model UN ended up coming to Canada is they were just shocked at what high school students in Canada have been able to produce without the assistance of adults. So just keep that in mind. And one thing that helps a lot in Canada is teachers and institutions have done a lot to really make Model UN a reality, right? There is so much work that teachers, faculty advisors, mentors, coaches, and all these other adults in the MUN space try to help maintain some continuity and make sure that Model UN is constructive, positive, and helpful for children. So, having said that, the kinds of local conferences we talk about are conferences like this. So, this is a random local conference I picked out. It's called Central Peel Model UN, and it's called Central Peel Secondary School MUN. So, CPSS MUN. This is a public school that exists out in Brampton. They are, if I remember correctly, an IB school and very, very academically capable. This school has been running a Model UN conference for almost a decade by the under the supervision of Mr. Justin S. And they do an amazing job. They are mostly a crisis focused conference. So they do a lot of the really exciting crisis committees, betrayal, action, real time emergencies. And it's a very, very popular event. This conference sells out every year in 24 hours. So they send an email in November saying, hey, or in October saying, hey, next week we're going to release the form. And you got 24 hours to book it. They literally sell you these tickets like the way people sell concert tickets. That's how crazy in demand they are. And these conferences are affordable. They're only 20, 30, $40. And that leads me to one of the first lessons I want everyone to understand. There is no better practice that exists on earth for Model UN than going to a local conference. Because out of all the things you could do, even a Linky class, the most cost effective thing you can do is compete at a local event. If you are a student in the Linky Model UN program and you're new or you're young and you haven't competed yet, I will tell you this really honestly, you're making a mistake. You are making a mistake because every day you wait to compete, you fall behind because there is so much you learn from just a weekend at these local conferences that will legitimately put you so far ahead. The classes that we have are meant to be in conjunction, in collaboration with the conferences you compete at. So I want to make this crystal clear. You should always, on a regular basis, be competing locally. And you want to vary it up. Go to conferences that are really large locally, go to ones that people haven't heard of at all. These local conferences are some of the best places for you to make friends, build networks, build your skills, and get real world practice. I cannot stress this enough. Local conferences are some of the greatest strengths that we have in our ability to get better in Model UN. There are other conferences that you'll see that also sell out incredibly quickly, but have their own kind of like circuit format that they design. So, for example, Monarch Park is a very reputable public school out in Scarborough. So, what they do is they actually run two conferences a year. They run a regular conference in the spring, and that is their main conference called MOMA. But they also run a crisis conference in the fall or in the winter time. And they rotate that where every year they're running two conferences and they're running one regular one crisis focused. And then other conferences do the exact opposite. So you always have a little bit of variety. The reason why I highlight these conferences is these are initiatives created by public school students wanting to offer an incredible experience to other people. Some conference I didn't mention here, but are very reputable. include a lot of the private school run Model UN conferences. For example, if you guys are familiar with UTS, UTS has been running the University of Toronto School's Model UN conference, which is called SOMA, for almost 50 plus years. In fact, one of the things that makes UTS famous as a school, right, which is the Southern Ontario Model United Nations Assembly, is that conference, right? They're famous because they were able to create this very reputable, almost institution that exists in Model UN. So there's many, many levels of experience you can get at the local level. But now, what makes us different? And that's a big question. So one of the things that I would say makes our Linky Model UN program different is that I personally, and this is the way we teach, I just don't care about power politics. I think that honestly, there is this overwhelming focus in the world of Model UN for those that actually compete. There's a focus that the way that you win in Model UN is some sort of mind games that you would play with people during the negotiation phase. That negotiation is the way people are winning and losing competition. I'll be absolutely honest. That is just not true. The way that people are winning and losing competition is that if you actually have something of value to say, things that other people don't know of, things that people are surprised about, things that make people think, wow, that is very insightful. They want to talk to you. They want to know more about your idea. That's really how you get your foot in the door. You do not get your foot in the door by trying to bully people during negotiations. It's not a strategy. There is an expression I use, and I use it a lot, which is in most cases, the conference is won before you walk in the door. Before you walk in the door, the conference is won or lost. If you know how to speak at a certain level and your research is better than anyone else in the room times 10, you are in a position to win. And that's an important philosophy because what a lot of students will see, and I want parents to be aware of this, is there are many conferences where there are some students who are just so charismatic or so aggressive in the negotiation, they're able to put themselves in a leading position. But that ends up making children think like, well, oh, I don't really need to have good ideas or what I say doesn't really matter. I just need to be one of those people. And don't get me wrong, you can win that way, but I don't really think it's a plan. It's not a plan because it always requires either other people to not know what they're doing, or for you, in many cases, to actually break the rules that they have set out. What matters here is putting yourself in the shoes of the country representing and actually powerfully advocating for those views. There is a reason why Linky Model UN students far exceed any other Model UN student being produced on the circuit. It's because every single thing that we do and that we care about is, do these ideas actually work? And that's a very big deal. To give you a little bit of context or an example or case study, when we were at Harvard Model Congress Europe, one of our students was developing this solution for the World Bank Committee around providing modern financial tech solutions to countries in Eastern Europe, right? And upgrading their digital infrastructure for banking systems. And the way that we would do MUN compared to other people is that she spent many hours understanding how the underlying systems work, how the World Bank operates, what exactly they've been doing around fintech, why the strategies have been working, watching even random corporate videos in the middle of Singapore that had like 200 views, but like really relevant to the topic that were never intended for children. But she'll watch all this academic corporate content because she's really trying to immerse herself in the shoes of the diplomats who have to deal with this in the real world. And in fact, one of the ideas she has produced is so innovative and so interesting. There was actually someone we met in Madrid who himself had worked for the World Bank for many years, who he himself is interested in this idea, and in fact asked her to submit the content to him before she submits it for publication to an academic journal because he wanted to give his thoughts, because he's like, oh, that's a very interesting design for this loan system I haven't seen before. That is what we mean by like, your research has to be top tier. It means the ideas you pitch in Model UN actually need to work. There are many ways we structure how to get to that point, but the key thing I want to emphasize here is that it isn't strategy that is putting Linky students on top. It's that the way that we design what is important and what needs to be focused on is the strategy. It's not some technique. It's not like, oh, speak 3 times and somehow you win. It's not just like, oh, we're going to try to pressure people in weird circles. It's that by grounding yourself mentally on what's important, which is helping people, and focusing on realistic solutions, you're already above most Model UN competitors. Most people who care about MUN, I believe, become too obsessed with the rules of the game. And I don't think that's a good way to think. I think what matters is focusing on what are better and better ways in which we can help people. What happens a lot in the Linky Model UN program is we love dynamic elements where people can get involved in the conversation, where we can do like exciting things that people haven't tried before. We can use maps and graphs and charts and graphics and images. And we can do all of this to try to get everyone excited about the debate and try to make it feel like a real world event. These are the things that you should be focused on because it just improves the experience for everyone. And I'll make this really clearly, I have no interest in trying to win awards solely as the only purpose of Model UN, and I have no interest focusing solely on power politics, right? I said at the beginning, and I'll say it at the end, our program is not one that aggressively focuses on unmod. And if you are in Model UN, you know what I'm talking about. If you do Model UN, you know there are a lot of students, all they think about is unmod. But what I like to think about are how can we help people? And what I will tell you is it produces success. In fact, something you should be aware of on the international circuit, we are considered almost our own strategy for winning. The way that Linky kids compete is meant to be distinct. In fact, I heard from one of my students in China that a lot of the Chinese circuit has been trying to compete like us. And I'm like, that's awesome. I want more kids to try to find better solutions, try to find better ideas. That's the whole goal for Model UN for me. And I think it's a good trend that we're seeing. So again, everyone, the way that we want to compete is not necessarily the international way, but the Linky way. The Linky way is we got to help people. We got to find ideas and pitch ideas that we actually can believe in. That's the goal. So what you'll see, and this is a small point, for those that do Model UN, those that understand Model UN, for those individuals, just take a look here. There is a bit of a misunderstanding that I think a lot of people have about what MUN is. Model UN definitely is diplomacy. Like, don't get me wrong. There's going to be the negotiations. They're going to be trying to strike a deal. You're going to be creating blocks, coalitions, alliances, all of that. That is Model UN. But Model UN is at least 50%, if not the majority, public policy. Public policy means that how can we craft government legislation and laws to try to help the most people and minimize harms? Fundamentally, MUN, at least even in the eyes of university admissions officer, is a public policy simulation. It's not just a politics simulation. And those are two different things. So remember that when you come into Model UN, the politics are going to be exciting and the deal making and sometimes the betrayal and all of that is exciting too. But I think public policy is exciting because what you can do just by shaping words on a paper is you can fundamentally change outcomes for countries. And what we're trying to figure out is if governments were to pass better laws, what would they be? And what would they look like? So what you'll see in our Model UN style, and this is a picture from an Oxford Model UN conference that we held last year, is we go with very immersive, very intensive Model UN experiences. So we ran this Korean War committee, and I'm going to give you guys the password to the background guide along with the website where you can access it. We ran a very extensive Korean War committee. What you'll see here is that this Korean War committee was different than the other ones you see in the Canadian crisis circuit. Crisis Model UN can get very fun, but if you've done it before, you realize it gets a little silly, right? Somehow you go from like a Korean War committee and you end up with aliens or something. You know what I mean? Like the crisis elements like get a little too extreme. What we do is a realistic crisis. We had a large battle map, historically accurate of the Korean Peninsula. It began at the Battle of Busan, and this is the start of the Korean War, or near the after the North Korea had invaded in the early days of the Korean War. South Korea was almost wiped out at this point, but the United Nations voted and created their first ever real intervention force, and it ended up being deployed in what was remaining in South Korea. And from that point onwards, they were able to battle it out. And it ends up leading to all kinds of complicated situations. They extend too far. China gets involved. All kinds of historical things take place. But the reason it was interesting is that in our simulation, we're not reenacting it. This is not like, oh, this is what happened in the real world. We're just going to do it again. What we did is we put them in the shoes of the United Nations commanders at the time of the conflict. Because what happened in the real world is that there was this large amphibious landing at Incheon, almost resembling D-Day, but it was considered to be a very high-risk effort. So if they attempted it again, we might just roll a die and maybe it doesn't work. Maybe what we try just doesn't happen to work this year. What does that mean for the fate of South Korea? And what does that mean for North Korean troops? So, in this kind of crisis committee, we were working with the Oxford students. So, you'll see in the white t shirt there, that was David. He's the head of the Oxford University's competitive travel team. And he helped run Oxford in Canada last year for the Korean War Committee. And they were there planning and strategizing. But because Linky was involved in hosting the conference, we primarily weren't competing. We were actually help judging. So our students built this by hand. They accurately recreated it from historical maps. And best of all, they even got a bunch of volunteer hours because this event you'll see is not by Linky the company. It's the Linky Foundation. All of the Model conferences we run are completely nonprofit. They're through a registered nonprofit organization. So it means everyone gets volunteer hours. The prices that we have is just to break even. That's it. So what we did for this competition was legitimately really exciting because what you had is students from across not just Canada, but in the world attend and they got to participate in this simulation. What you also do, and this is really fun, we do a lot of fantasy like committees as well. So you'll see here there was a Lord of the Rings committee where we had some of our students dress up as different characters. It's really funny because this is one of our students like leading down another student as if he's the father and she's the daughter, and it was this like wedding ceremony that happened in Lord of the Rings. But it was fun because we had fantasy committees as well where our students, you can see in the back room, they dressed up the rooms. We created a Lord of the Rings map. But this level of immersion is rare in the Model N world. But now that we have really championed it, I see more and more conferences trying to incorporate elements. So as the Linky MUN team, we almost feel like it's our responsibility to always keep pushing the bar of what is possible with these conferences. Okay, so having said that, I'm going to pause it there for a moment. So very quickly, because this is a 2-hour presentation, does anyone have any questions so far? Any questions at all about Model UN, anything like that? Okay, so what I want to do, just because there isn't too much time and there isn't, I want to have a chance to talk to people one-on-one, is can I get a hand again for anyone who is currently not in our Model UN program? Do you mind just using the raise hand function, please? Okay. So it's only 5 people, is that correct? All right, in that case, I think this is what I will do. So, give me one moment. So let me actually pivot a little bit. For the 5 students not in our program, I'm going to do this for you. I am going to start talking about MUN, assuming everybody here is actually in our MUN program, which is a very different conversation. For the 5 students that are new, please stick around until the end of the call. I will talk to each of you guys one-on-one very briefly, so I can just try to get you guys set up so you guys know where you need to go. Does it sound good? Okay, great. So now I'm going to pivot straight into whatever we need to do for our normal competition circumstances. So let's talk for a minute. Give me 1 second. Okay, So I'd like you guys to have a one thing just for your record keeping. I'm going to type this into the chat. So you guys can put down, that is the Oxford MUN Canada website. And the password to the Oxford MUN Canada website is, let me write this down. I'll give me 1 second. So it is Oxford MUN Canada 2025. So generally speaking, for everybody who recently hopped on the call, if you were not here last year in our Model UN program, and I'm assuming a lot of you guys aren't, what you're generally going to see right here is that you'll see these are our committees that we had on the website. When you click on some of the committees, let's say you click on like African Union, and then you click this picture here, you will get the background guide. And then when you type the background guide password, you'll be able to open it up. You'll see the details. Just you can write that down. It's Oxford MUN Canada 2025. Everyone is welcome to look at it. These background guides are very extensive and very well written, so I highly recommend taking a look when you have a chance. Now, I'm going to show you guys a different document that I think is going to be helpful for those that are younger in the program and are thinking about how they can advance their skills. So let me see if I can show this to you. Give me 1 second. Can everyone please open up this document? Okay, so very quickly, can everyone raise their hands? Who here has read the actual Tournament of Champions document before for Harvard MUN Canada? Anyone at all? Okay, I recommend two things. Number one, I recommend you actually print out this document if you haven't already. It's available for free on the H1 Canada website. We will be releasing an updated version, a significantly updated version in around 3 weeks. So if you wanted to wait a little bit, you could, but just keep that in mind. In order for you to understand what needs to happen in Model UN at a high level, I want to just talk about it a little bit. I built a rule book along with the Harvard team that was signed off by the Harvard International Relations Council on what I think needs to happen or what we think needs to happen in improving the world of Model UN. And in this rule book, I give a lot of context on how it should be used. This rule book summarizes a lot of what is lacking in most Model UN debate. So, generally speaking, what the rule book really tries to illustrate and highlight are all the different criterias and details that is typically not covered in a Model UN debate. So, leaving aside some elements, one of the areas I would highlight a lot, foreign policy. And I would put a note of this. So, one thing that a lot of other students don't do in Model UN, that Linky does a lot, is we try to understand foreign policy better than anyone else. And this is a real moment. This is a real thing that you'll see in committees where most people in Model UN don't necessarily study their country's foreign policy well. They're not sure what their country believes, nor do they work within the constraints of those beliefs. But we always practice and prepare. One of our core strategies is we never pitch an idea that violates the foreign policy of our country. It's an opportunity for us to demonstrate that we understand our countries better than most people do, but it's also to help push that realism in the conversation. So people are also forced to work with constraints. Having said that, there are different ways you can think about foreign policy. Personally speaking, the definition provided in the TOC is the best way to think about it. Number one is, or well, let me, before I get into this, I'll clarify a little bit. If you're somebody who competes in Model UN, what you've seen before is that what you've seen before is that some delegates will say, oh, I'm the delegate of a country, therefore I have a right to say something about my country, right? But that's not really how Model UN works. When you're a delegate in Model UN, you are forced to represent the country's views. But what happens if your country has never said something about it? They've never made a comment on an idea. So use these two rules. The two rules are number one, it does not violate any clearly held belief of that country. And number two, does not go against the interests or intentions of the governing party of that country. So really what we're asking is if this policy would reasonably be proposed by somebody who would actually be in a committee like this. That's all we're really asking. And that bar, although it seems very reasonable, is not something many people meet, which allows us an opportunity to showcase to the judge and the rest of the committee where their foreign policy actually stands, why they might be hypocritical in proposing what they are. We'll go to the next thing, financial considerations. Around financial considerations, this is also very much a distinguishing factor in the Linky MUN program, but it's something that we're trying to highlight for all people moving forward. So in the Tournament of Champions rulebook, which is a feature of Harvard MUN Canada, what you will generally see here is that we have very specific financial considerations that we have set out for people. So that instead of saying we are going to have effectively an unlimited budget without constraints or limitations, we are going to have very specific things that you have to take into consideration when talking about money. For example, you can't propose ideas that are funded by NGOs, nonprofits, or charities. Countries and groups of countries can't fund them, nor the World Bank, IMF, or development banks. What needs to happen, more so than anything, is that the people funding these projects or the way that you fund these projects are through innovative policy, that you find an actual policy solution to pay and fund for these projects. And that is something that is important. I would read that section as well. Long story short, the main takeaway that I think everybody should have is you need to ask yourself the right question. These 6 questions are important because what we try to do in our Model UN program and what we think all people should do, it's why we put in the TOC, is that whenever you're trying to find a good idea to an important real world problem, you want to go through these steps. When you think you have, again, a genius solution, does this idea exist in any shape or form? Has anyone implemented it before? If so, what happened? If not, why hasn't it happened or been implemented before? How will you pay for this idea? How will you enforce this idea? Does this idea comply with your country's foreign policy? These questions are the best ways to structure your research, and I would write them down in your notes. No matter what committee you're in, no matter what conference you go to, these 6 questions, almost like effectively rules, layers, however you want to describe them, will always be true. You need to take these things into consideration whenever crafting, designing, and developing your approach to a committee. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. I think there's some people in the wait room. I'm going to admit them as well. So other rules here are important, but not necessarily as important as you'll need it. I think what I'll do is, because I'm still getting a bit of a hard time trying to understand exactly who is in the room, because I'm trying to get a sense of the need. So this is what we'll do. I am going to formally end this presentation a little bit early because I have a couple different things I'd like to share and talk about. I want to spend more time talking to the people actually here because I want to make sure I'm able to help you walking away from this presentation, support you in the best way that I can. So I'm going to formally end the presentation here.